We're at the presidential office in Taipei to find out all the details of Tsai Ing-wen's upcoming America trip.
Two dear friends, the leaders of Russia and China, meet days after Vladimir Putin's indictment as a war criminal. Google Taiwan has pledged a $9.8 million news fund, but what might that mean for local media? Plus, climate change is here and we must act now. That's according to the UN's leading scientific body. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Eric Gao. Starting off in Taiwan news, the presidential office has now revealed details about President Tsai Ing-wen's upcoming international trip, which will include stops in the U.S. Leslie Liao was at the press conference to find out more.
President Tsai Ing-wen is headed to Guatemala and Belize, two of Taiwan's diplomatic allies in Central America. It'll be the first overseas trip she's taken since the COVID-19 pandemic. The president is scheduled to leave on March 29th and will return on April 7th. She will head to Guatemala first and then on to Belize on April 3rd.
在去年9月，瓜地马拉的贾迈代总统特别邀请蔡总统能够访问瓜地马拉。此外，贝里斯总理布里先纽伉俪曾于去年3月访台。因此，为了回应友邦多次诚挚的邀请及展现对友邦的重视，那我们也要持续深化民主盟友间的合作发展。
Joining Tsai on the trip are high-ranking officials like Foreign Minister Joseph Wu, Secretary General to the President Ling Jialong, and Deputy Economics Minister Chen Zengqi. Tsai's trip comes at a crucial time. Last week, another Central American ally, Honduras, announced that it would cut ties with Taiwan in favor of China. The trip will entail two stopovers in the United States, one in New York and one in Los Angeles. And it's been reported that while in California, President Tsai will meet with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Last week, the White House said that Tsai's transits through the U.S. are just that, transits, and they do not constitute official visits. Such stopovers in the U.S. are a sensitive topic because Taiwan and the United States share only unofficial ties. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory and strongly protests any reference to its independent sovereignty. With Taiwan-Honduran ties hanging by a thread, Tsai's trip to Central America will hope to stabilize friendships in the region. Eason Sun and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
President Tsai has given one of Taiwan's top honors to a former White House security advisor. Tsai presented the Order of Brilliant Star to Robert O'Brien, who served under the Trump administration. It's an honor given to people who have contributed greatly to national development. Tsai cited O'Brien's help in building up friendship between Taiwan and the U.S. In his remarks, O'Brien said the U.S. stands with Taiwan and will help the country defend itself from Chinese aggression.
But our adversaries must know that we will never exchange our freedom, our principles, our values, and sacrifice them in exchange for peace. Instead, we will secure peace through our strength.
The ruling parties of Japan and Taiwan are holding security talks in Taipei. It's the first time these talks have been held in person. Two lawmakers from Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party and two from Japan's Liberal Democratic Party began their discussions on Tuesday. Most of the meetings are taking place behind closed doors and the agenda is secret. But a Taiwanese source says they will talk about Taiwan's military reforms and Japan's changing defense policy. Japan plans to ramp up its military spending as part of a push to contain China, which Tokyo sees as its greatest strategic challenge. Taiwan's ruling party welcomed the talks. It says it hopes to hold the next round in Japan.
更期待将来有机会能够在日本举办我们两党之间的2+2的对谈。
While President Tsai plans to visit the U.S., her predecessor, Ying-jeou, is going to China later this month. It will be a historic and controversial trip. Premier Chen Jinping says he hopes Ma will maintain Taiwan's dignity while he's there.
我想马总统也应该听见了台湾人民的声音我们希望他此行能够维护我们国家的尊严和主权，这样子才不会让我们台湾人民失望。
Ma is a senior figure in the opposition Kuomintang, and he will leave for China on March 27th for a 12-day visit. It'll be the first time a former or current leader of Taiwan has visited the country since 1949. Ma's foundation says he plans to visit his ancestors' graves for the upcoming Tomb Sweeping Festival. He will also lead a delegation of Taiwanese students to discuss academic exchanges with China. For more on former President Ma's trip to China, reporter Sam Hui spoke to Ross Feingold, a political analyst based here in Taipei.
Do you think President Ma's visit to China will help to cool down the tension between Taiwan and China?
Relations between Taiwan and China depend on the policies of the current governments on both sides. And the government here in Taipei is not taking its policy advice on China relations from former President Ma. In fact, they have quite a very different vision for what relations should be, and specifically what the basis of relations should be.
What impact will it bring to the ruling Democratic Progressive Party?
For the DPP, the visit gives a lot of items that they could criticize President Ma and also criticize the Chinese Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang, over as well, because although former President Ma is not representing the party did issue a statement basically saying that they think it's a good idea for dialogue. So they certainly don't oppose President Ma's visit to China. So the DPP, they could criticize both Ma and they could criticize the Chinese Nationalist Party as well.
What impact will it bring to the opposition, Kuomintang?
The labeling of the Chinese Nationalist Party as being soft on China is something that they struggle to remove this label. And President Ma visiting China doesn't help the Kuomintang remove that label, but unfortunately for them, they're kind of stuck because they can't oppose his trip or really criticize it. But then on the other side, they have to try and explain to the voters why this is a good idea. And oh, by the way, they have to explain why we're not soft on China either. So it's definitely a struggle for them.
That was Ross Feingold, a political analyst living in Taiwan, speaking with TaiwanPlus reporter Sam Hui. Chinese leader Xi Jinping met with Russia's President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Monday. The meeting is aimed at strengthening bilateral relations against what they say is aggression from the West. Jaime Okan has this report.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin sitting with a man he calls his dear friend, China's leader Xi Jinping. The two men met on Monday for the first time since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year. According to state media, the visit is meant to reaffirm ties with Russia and build on the existing friendship between the two leaders. Experts say that China is trying to cast itself as a peacemaker. And during Xi's visit, Putin said that he would discuss Beijing's peace plan. Xi also took the opportunity to heap praise his Russian counterpart.
我也知道呢，明年贵国呢将进行总统选举，在总统先生的坚强领导下，俄罗斯繁荣发展取得了长足的进步。我坚信俄罗斯人民一定会继续与总统先生坚定的支持。
But behind these glowing compliments, the meeting comes at a tense time for Russia's president. As the country's invasion of Ukraine enters its second year, U.S. intelligence says that over 200,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded since the start of the war. Beijing is working to promote its peace plan for ending hostilities, and many countries, though, are skeptical of these intentions. While claiming to be a neutral party in the conflict, Beijing has also refused to condemn Putin for initiating the war in Ukraine. And China has provided Russia with an economic lifeline in the face of Western-led sanctions. Now there are concerns that China could offer military assistance to Russia, a move experts say would damage Beijing's relations with the West.
I think the key tipping point will be if China were to provide lethal aid to Russia. That would be, I think, a big game changer for the Europeans. And I think that's why Beijing might be having pause about taking that additional step. But if that were to happen, which the United States, the U.S. administration is warning, I think that would be another catalyst in really pushing Europe far closer to the United States' position vis-a-vis China.
The visit also comes just days after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin. The ICC has accused the Russian president of committing war crimes in Ukraine and deporting thousands of children from the country. U.S. officials say that by holding a cordial meeting with Putin, an indicted war criminal, Xi's visit to Moscow is a sign that China's neutrality is fading away.
That President Xi is traveling to Russia days after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for President Putin suggests that China feels no responsibility to hold the Kremlin accountable for the atrocities committed in Ukraine, and instead of even condemning them, it would rather provide diplomatic cover for Russia to continue to commit those very crimes.
After his meeting in Moscow, Xi is reportedly planning to hold a virtual discussion with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. As Russia braces for a possible spring offensive, it hopes to maintain a strong relationship with its most powerful ally. Meanwhile, China is determined to cultivate an image of being a benevolent and responsible superpower. Alex Chen and Jaime Okan for TaiwanPlus.
Turning now to climate change, without drastic and immediate cuts to emissions, the planet is on course to surpass irreversible levels of warming within the next decade. That's the message from the world's leading scientific body on climate change. In the latest report, they warned that the impact to life could be more dire than predicted. Sally Jensen has this story.
Floods, droughts, fires. The catastrophic impacts of the climate crisis are becoming increasingly apparent, in some cases worse than previously thought. And we're not doing enough to try and stop this. That was the urgent message by the UN's leading climate science body in Switzerland on Monday. In its summary report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says the climate crisis has already caused widespread and substantial losses to almost every aspect of human life.
It tells us, and we know that climate change is here now. It tells us that climate change is a real threat to human and planetary well-being.
The summary lays out how these impacts directly affect our health, our food sources, our water, and more. But one thing stood out from the report. This graph shows how far off track the world is in keeping the rise in global temperatures to a minimum. And as a small tropical island, Taiwan is particularly vulnerable to these changes. Increasing global temperatures are already causing sea levels to rise. If the average global temperature increases by 2 degrees Celsius, this is how much of Taiwan would be submerged. And if it rises by 4 degrees Celsius, which is what we are on course for, it would be this much, causing large parts of Taipei and the west coast to be underwater. A rise in global temperatures would be even more pronounced in Taiwan. If the average temperature increases by just 2 degrees Celsius, this would manifest as temperature rises of 3 to 4 degrees in Taipei, which already experiences lethal heat waves in the summer. Experts also say Taiwan's climate goals are not enough to prevent these disasters.
这样的一个目标来讲的话，跟国际上面要迈向近零的这个路径的要求来讲的话，就会有很大的落差。因为国际上面的话，总温室气体里面减量的要求到2030年的时候是要减43%。
Scientists say that the severity of the impacts climate change will have on future generations depend on the choices that we make now.
The real question is whether our will to reduce emissions quickly means we reach 1.5 degrees, maybe go a little bit over, but then come back down, or whether we go blasting through 1.5 degrees, go through even 2 degrees and keep on going. So the future really is in our hands.
But there is a glimmer of hope. The report offers several actions that the world can take that are already available, such as shutting down fossil fuel infrastructure, restoring ecosystems, and transitioning to green energy. The findings say these steps would not only help turn around the climate and ecological crises, but address health, equity, justice, and even economic issues. The question is whether governments, communities, businesses, and individuals will take the warning seriously, and if they are prepared to take action fast enough. Ethan Pan and Sally Jensen for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, Taiwan is set to see electricity prices rise in April. Find out how that compares to the rest of the world after the break. Welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. Local electricity prices are set to rise in April, with industrial users facing the steepest hikes. That's as fuel prices rise and as Taiwan's state-run power company faces steep losses. But despite the hike, Taiwan's prices will remain low compared to global standards. John Van Trieste reports.
Stubborn energy prices and mounting losses, including more than $8 billion last year alone. That's what Taiwan's state-run power company Taipower is up against as the warmer months approach. It's a time of year when people turn on their air conditioning and power usage peaks. And that's why, come April, power bills are set to increase. The government says households that use less than 700 kilowatt hours a month won't see their bills go up, while households that do will see a 3% hike.
兼顾台电的这个稳健的经营，然后不要千万不能倒，好，那也照顾了民生跟相关的物价的平稳。
But it's a very different story for industrial users. Prices are expected to jump 11% on average. Taiwanese Commerce Association CNAIC says this, combined with last year's 15% hike in big users' power bills, is becoming a worrying trend. Industry groups want the government to slow down energy bill hikes for the sake of Taiwan's competitiveness. Still, even after the hike, Taiwan's average price per kilowatt hour is only expected to hit around 10 US cents. This is still on the lower end of the global scale, with countries like Germany topping out at around 50 US cents. Taipower hopes the hike will cause big users to change their patterns of energy consumption.
台电公司是希望就是说借由这个鼓励这个方式，然后一方面也能够节约用电，一方面也能够照顾我们这些租屋主，减轻他们的负担。
The company also says these relatively low prices mean Taiwan's industrial sector will keep its global edge. Klein Wang and John Van Trieste for Taiwan Plus.
Next month's price hike comes as Taiwan is phasing out nuclear power. But the government is still facing calls to rethink this policy over fears that the country might run out of electricity. Louise Watt looks at why some think turning off nuclear power does not bode well for Taiwan's energy or national security.
After almost 2 decades working as a nuclear engineer, Hal Falls now makes components for Taiwan's onshore wind industry, helping these turbines generate power. As much as he supports the country's move towards wind and solar power, he doesn't believe Taiwan should give up on nuclear energy.
Yes, we will have some wind, but the more nukes that we shut down, I feel that the less secure our power grids are.
A simulation of a blockade around Taiwan during recent Chinese military drills has raised concerns about the stability of the island's energy supply. China sees Taiwan as part of its territory and has threatened to take it by force if necessary. But many observers think it could instead try to bring Taiwan to its knees by surrounding it and starving it of its energy imports. Right now, nuclear provides 10% of Taiwan's electricity needs, behind coal on 44% and natural gas on 37%. Much of these two are imported. Renewable energy generates just 6% of Taiwan's power, but the government wants to increase that to 20% by 2025. This is what's known as the second nuclear power plant. It's been supplying power to Taiwan since 1981. But the operating license of its last reactor is due to expire next year, and the plant is being shut down. That means Taiwan will be left with just one nuclear plant in operation, and the government wants to shut that down in 2025. One of the biggest concerns about nuclear power is where you store the nuclear waste.
用过燃料是放射性最高的，我已经把它放在干式储存里面，放在旁边。好，那现在我们知道用过燃料是放在炉心嘛，因为没有地方可以去，干式储存没有办法用，所以它就现在放在炉心里面。那我们希望能够尽早把它拿出来放到干式储存里的安全储存。
Public opinion in Taiwan turned against nuclear power after the Fukushima disaster in Japan, with some nervous that an earthquake in Taiwan might also one day spark an emergency. But now, 11 years on, Japan is turning back to nuclear power. In Taiwan, it's a different picture. Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party has long been anti-nuclear. And after coming to power in 2016, they began enacting their policy to phase it out within a decade. Voters rejected the policy in a referendum in 2018 amid concerns about the nation's power supply and air pollution. But the government is pushing ahead with its plans.
其实现在世界各国在核电的使用上面，其实第一个是工程真的时间非常的久，那第二个就是其实因为安全问题成本增加的非常的高，那这些都是重要的问题。那除了这个以外，其实人才也是个问题，就是这一个工业要突然重新发展起来，需要大量的人才的投入，这些都需要时间啦。
Tsang, who's also the acting chair of state-run Taiwan Power Company, or Taipower, says 2 offshore wind power generation systems to be completed in 2026 and 2027 will replace the output of Taiwan's nuclear plants. But after a series of power outages this year and last, businesses are skeptical.
If you do the mathematics, you see, look at the numbers, we are very marginal on the electricity supply. As much as many years ago, we didn't want nuclear, but you look at the reality now, what's wrong with that, right? If it is safe, it is clean, it's cheap.
Pro-nuclear advocates like Falls also point to its importance to Taiwan's national security. It's more stable than wind and solar, which are dependent on the elements. And it's more secure than coal and gas, which rely heavily on imports. In the event of a blockade, Falls says, nuclear power would help keep Taiwan's lights on.
Nuclear energy. You could store 5 years worth of energy in one swimming pool that's, smaller than this area that we're sitting in. That's 5 years.
But Taiwan's more than 40-year nuclear power era is still, for now at least, drawing to an end. At a time when Taiwan's economy and energy needs keep on growing. However it does it, the country has to find a way to manage this transition, to make sure that its economy keeps turning. Klein Wong, Pichi Zhuang, and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Meanwhile, environmentalists are celebrating the shutdown of Taiwan's second nuclear plant. Sally Jensen spoke to Tsai Ing-wen from the Green Citizens Action Alliance about the issue, which remains controversial in Taiwan.
Can you give us an overview of how important nuclear power is to Taiwan's energy system?
台湾的核能电厂的电力大概占台湾11%、12%左右，其实本来并不高。核二厂的第二个机组，其实它的电力并不是占非常大的比重。其实过去我们再生能源的这个发电量就已经超过了这个核电厂。
Many people have been worrying that by shutting down the 3 nuclear plants, there will be electricity shortages. So how would you reply to those concerns?
那其实现在台湾比较大的问题是因为我们不只是不用核能，我们的燃煤电厂也在下降。所以其实两个都在同步下降的过程当中，电力的确有一些紧绷。所以其实现在要补的电力，的确是核电还有火力电厂，也就是燃煤。那台湾是用燃气的增加来弥补这个电力。
Gas-fired power, which is sometimes called natural gas or methane gas, is also a fossil fuel, and burning fossil fuels causes climate change. So isn't this a counterintuitive direction for Taiwan to go in?
那所以其实台湾现在在发展再生能源的情况下，会面临有点急迫的状况，就是会希望再生能源能够发展的快一点，才可以让这个燃气电厂不需要就是过渡这么久。那这是台湾目前非常艰难的一个挑战。因为其实再生能源要成长的过程当中，它也是需要时间的啊。那当然我们更强调的是，其实我们觉得产业跟政府应该在节能的部分下更多的力气，才可以不需要再使用这么多的能源。
That was Sally Jensen talking to Tsai Ing-wen from the Green Citizens Action Alliance about the controversy surrounding nuclear power. A new scientific discovery is creating a buzz in the UK. Researchers there found that bumblebees can not only learn how to solve puzzles, but also pass the solutions on to other bees. At Queen Mary University, individual bees were taught to push a red tab to get to the sugar inside. Other bees were able to copy that behavior just by watching, with a 98% success rate. Researchers say this shows that humans don't understand animal intelligence as well as we might think.
They have brains the size of a pinhead, yet they're still able to produce this behavior. That whatever humans can do is some kind of evolutionary pinnacle. This way of looking at it has meant that we've missed some really fascinating capabilities found among even tiny invertebrates.
Thank you for watching Taiwan Plus News. Remember to download the Taiwan Plus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out these shots from the Cape Epic mountain bike race in South Africa. I'm Eric Gao. Take care and see you next time.